2311 Racing might be headed to Ford in 2024. Eric Almirola might also retire at the end of 2023, and Stewart-Haas Racing might downsize as well. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to your video. We got to NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just shove straight those really quickly. We're going to have I start talking about Fortnite. As it was announced on Monday early afternoon that Alex Bowman will be running a Fortnite scheme this weekend at Daytona International Speedway. Obviously, this is the race that will determine who makes the playoffs. I think his paint scheme looks absolutely incredible. It looks amazing. It'd be a shame for him to go out with a really beautiful paint scheme. It's one of my favorites so far this year. I love it, and I'm glad to see that Fortnite is going to be sponsoring Alex Bowman. I think it looks really awesome and really cool. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Wawa. As it was reported by Adam Stern, I believe yesterday, that Wawa will be sponsoring 4 Xfinity Series cars this weekend at Daytona International Speedway on Friday. They'll be sponsoring Natalie Decker in the 50 Theory for Emerling Gase, Joe Graff Jr. in the 38 car for RSS Racing, Brett Moffitt in the 25 car for AM Racing, and JJ Yaley as well. Now, Wawa, of course, is the main sponsor for this weekend's Xfinity Series race. I think it's really cool that Wawa, which has, I think, will be promoting the new energy drink company that is coming out. I think it is really cool that they're going to be doing this. I love the fact when you have teams do this. We saw this with like the JD Stacy days. Joe will say there was a lot of corruption with that. But it's really cool to see that Wawa is going to be promoting and sponsoring 4 Xfinity Series cars this weekend at Daytona. I think it's really awesome and really exciting and pretty awesome stuff. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Linus Lundquist. As it was announced yesterday or on Monday that Linus Lundquist will be driving the 60 for Meyershank Racing once again at Worldwide Technology Raceway, meaning that Linus will be making his IndyCar Oval debut in IndyCar with Meyershank Racing. Obviously, the reason he's driving his car is because Simon Pagenaud has not been medically cleared to race at this point after suffering a pretty bad accident at Mid-Ohio. I think it's a really good opportunity for Linus. He's done a really good job in this IndyCar races he's ran. I know he crashed at Nashville, but he's had a lot of opportunities to race, and I think he's done a pretty solid job in this opportunities he's had so far. I think he's vying for a full-time IndyCar ride for 2024, and if he can run well enough this weekend and real good on the oval, I think teams may take an opportunity to maybe work with him in 2024. But it's really cool that he's getting an opportunity. We're still wishing Simon Pagenaud the best of luck to get back to the racetrack soon, but nonetheless, great opportunity for Linus Lundquist in IndyCar and in Oval. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joseph Newgarden. As it was announced on Monday afternoon that Joseph Newgarden will be making his IMSA GTP debut at Petit Le Mans, driving for Porsche Penske. He'll be teammates with Lawrence Fanthorpe. Joseph Newgarden's already made his IMSA debut already this year in the World 24, but he drove in the LMP2 class for Tower Motorsports and was teammates with Scott McLaughlin, he, of course, is one of the Bus Bros. Joseph Newgarden, of course, runs full-time in IndyCar and has maybe an outside chance to win the championship, but it's very likely at this point he will not win the championship this year in IndyCar. But it's really cool to see that Joseph Newgarden is branching out. I think he's want to do some more IMSA racing, and I think he's been also open to racing NASCAR as well, which IMSA, of course, is owned by NASCAR. But still, I think it's really awesome, a great opportunity for Joseph Newgarden, and I think he's got a really good chance and possibility to win. Porsche Team Penske's been really exciting, and I think this is only their first year with the Porsche team this year on a full-time basis in the GTP class this year. So it's really cool to see that Joseph Newgarden will get the opportunity, chance to run in the IMSA GTP class. It'd be cool for him to win Petit Le Mans. I think he's got a really good chance and great shot to do that. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brad Perez. As it was announced on Monday that Brad Perez will drive the 30 for On Point Motorsports this weekend at the Milwaukee Mile, racing in his first or second oval start. Brad Perez is a very talented driver, only runs on a part-time basis, but generally he runs on the road courses, and generally on the road courses he does a really good job. But I do love the fact that he's branching out and not just running the road courses, but is running the ovals as well. And On Point Motorsports at times has shown some pretty decent pace. They haven't had race-winning speed or top 15 or 20 speed, but certainly I think a top 25 or top 30 is definitely possible. This truck is capable of that. I think he'll have a solid run this weekend, and nonetheless, glad to see that Brad Perez is getting a chance to run in the Truck Series once again at the Milwaukee Mile. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Chandler Smith. As it was announced on Monday that Chandler Smith will be driving the 13 for Kaulig Racing in the Cup Series this weekend at Daytona. This race, if I'm not mistaken, was not originally on Chandler Smith's schedule for 2023 in the Cup Series. He's going to run 4 or 5 races altogether this year, but they're adding another race for him to get a chance and an opportunity to run. He'll be running double duty because, of course, is currently running full-time for Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think Chandler Smith is going to be an underdog in this race. Kaulig Racing's had some pretty good pace on the super speedway tracks, and to strike the numbers for the team, I think that is going to help him out quite a bit, especially in the NASCAR Cup Series race. Obviously, there's a chance he could go full-time Cup racing next year in 2024. I think there's an outside chance of that because he does have sponsorship funding. But nonetheless, I think this is a really good and awesome opportunity for Chandler. Hopefully, he can make the best of it and have a good run. I think Chandler has a lot of talent, and I think he has potential to win a Cup Series championship one day. We'll see what happens, though, but nonetheless, really happy to see that Chandler Smith will be driving for Kaulig Racing in the Cup Series. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the IndyCar game. Now, Mike Straw has been up to date on a lot of the stuff that's been going on with Motorsports Games. And about a week or two ago, we talked about this where Motorsports Games is likely going to be losing their exclusive license with NASCAR. Well, in a new recent report that came out from the earnings call that kind of came out recently from Motorsports Games, basically he reported that NASCAR is expected to also lose the exclusive license with Motorsports Games. Well, Motorsports Games losing exclusive license of NASCAR. And then, of course, it was also reported in the bottom of this tweet that the IndyCar game may not even happen at all. Obviously, IndyCar does have an exclusive deal currently very similar to NASCAR, even though that's very likely to be ending in the next month or so. IndyCar has an exclusive license deal with Motorsports Games. And the IndyCar game has been delayed. It was supposed to come out in 2023. That, of course, was basically when we didn't know much about Motorsports Games. But when Ignition got released, everyone was really skeptical of it. Then they delayed the IndyCar game to 2024. And then the game hasn't happened at this point. I'm going to be honest. I don't think this IndyCar game is happening. I know that there are people saying it was going to happen. The Australian studio that works in Motorsports Games said it was going to happen. But honestly, it sounds like there's a chance that this company may go bankrupt because they're losing money at a rapid pace. I mean, they lost like $8 million, and they only have like $1 million cash, I think, currently at the moment. Remember, they got a recent investment, but they've lost so much money, and they've been spending it on other stuff. And it's just really frustrating for the game world and all that. I know a lot of fans are frustrated with everything going on with Motorsports Games because a lot of people are not big fans of exactly what's going on currently at the moment. So I hope Motorsports Games lose the IndyCar license as well, and they just shut that company down because they deserve to have their company shut down. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Riley Herbst. As it was announced on Monday and early Tuesday that Riley Herbst will be driving to 36 for Front Row Motorsports this weekend at Daytona International Speedway. Riley Herbst currently drives the 98 car for Stewart-Haas Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, has made 1 or 2 NASCAR Cup Series starts up to this point, and has scored a top 10 in the Daytona 500. Riley Herbst also has a really good chance on possibly to make the playoffs in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but he's been kind of struggling over the last 10 to 11 NASCAR Xfinity Series races. But I will say Riley Herbst has shown some signs of improvement. And Riley Herbst is also a pretty decent super speedway racer. And I do believe that Riley Herbst will have an outside chance to maybe not win, but certainly have a pretty good run. It wouldn't surprise or shock if he gets second career top 10 this year at this weekend's race at Daytona, because Firmer Motorsports' Cup program and their equipment on super speedways, especially of how good Todd Gillen and Michael Medell have been, I do believe that you're going to see Riley Herbst have a pretty solid run this weekend. And, of course, he's going to have a really nice, beautiful Monster Energy Zero Sugar scheme, which I think this scheme looks amazing and looks absolutely incredible. So I'm very excited about this. I love the fact that Riley Herbst getting a chance and an opportunity to make more starts in the Cup Series. I know I'm not been always the biggest fan of him, but still, I think it's a great opportunity chance for Riley Herbst, and hopefully he can make the best of it and have a good run in this car. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the overtime lineup. Now, NASCAR, and it was reported by Dustin Long as well from NBC Sports, that NASCAR apparently screwed up the overtime lineup at Watkins Glen. And NASCAR basically said they had made a mistake when it comes to this. And they said that Josh Berry's transponder, when he crashed in the grass on the last restart before that, his transponder did not hit the loop. So Parker Kligerman and Sammy Smith should have been a little bit farther up than they were, and instead they were behind Josh Berry on the restart, despite the fact that Josh Berry had spun out. They had Josh Berry basically in front of them instead of behind him, meaning that where they were supposed to restart, they didn't get in the correct position. Well, I appreciate NASCAR for at least admitting that they made a mistake, because sometimes NASCAR doesn't admit when they screw up on situations, but I appreciate NASCAR did go ahead and admit they made a mistake. But sometimes mistakes do end up happening, and sometimes they get stuff wrong, but you can't always get things wrong, especially if you're a sport that is sanctioning. If you get overtime lineups wrong, you can affect the finishing, especially if we do get into the playoffs, and this is something that does come into play because we only got 2 races left for the Xfinity Series till their regular season playoffs, or 3 weeks, I should say, till their regular season playoffs comes to an end. They need to figure out what they're going to do, because if they make any more mistakes, so it is going to be really, really bad and a bad look for NASCAR in general. So hopefully it's something that they can resolve long term and get the situation taken care of, because in my opinion, this is an absolute major issue. Hopefully this is an issue that they can resolve in the near future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the SRX. Now, basically it was announced yesterday that the 2024 SRX dates have been officially confirmed. And just like this year where they ran on Thursday nights, once again in 2024, they're going to be running on Thursday Night Thunder once again, all on ESPN. So here are the 6 dates. July 11th, July 18th, July 25th, August 1st, August 8th, and August 15th are going to be the 6 race dates that are going to be run in 2024. Now, I will want to mention this past weekend's ratings, because actually over 500,000 people tuned in to the season finale of the SRX. In fact, it's 589,000 people tuned in the final race, which I think is pretty good, which was the best rating all year long. Look, going into 2024 for the SRX, they haven't announced any of the drivers yet that are going to be in the SRX in 2024 at this point. My guess is you're going to probably have guys like Tony Stewart. Brad Keselowski's probably going to come back and run next year. I think Ryan Newman returns to try to finish championship. Mark Andretti, I think, will come back. I think Haley Deegan, she's also going to return. I think she did a pretty solid job in her starts. I think others like maybe Ken Schrader come back on a full-time basis. But I will also say I think you're going to have a lot of one-off drivers. I think you'll maybe have Chase Elliott come back and maybe run a race or two. Kyle Busch, I certainly think, could run full-time in the SRX this year, because Kyle Busch, I think, did a really, really good job. I think that you'll maybe see Kevin Harvick maybe run a race or two. Denny Hamlin maybe comes back. I think maybe even see Bubba Wallace get a chance and opportunities. I certainly think Bubba Wallace would do a really, really good job. And I think there's other forms of race like Haley Castroneves could come in else. Of course, Tony Stewart will probably be full-time in the SRX as well. But when it comes to the SRX next year as well, tracks, Berlin Raceway needs to come back, in my opinion. I personally want I-55 to come on the SRX schedule again in 2024. Because in my personal opinion, it's my home track. I want to get out there. I didn't get to go out there last year in 2022, and I felt ashamed that I didn't get to go in 2022. So I hope they bring I-55 back, because I certainly want to be there in 2024 if it gets back on the schedule. But I'm happy that the 2024 dates have been confirmed, and they're ready to go for next year. I'm excited about this, and I'm glad to see that the 2024 SRX dates have been set. Just hopefully this time they can rotate it around so people know when the races are exactly going on. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jordan Anderson Racing. Now, Jordan Anderson Racing has announced their lineup for this weekend at Daytona. Parker Reslab, of course, is going to remain in the 31 car, as he's been driving a 31 car the whole entire season. But what's going on with the other 2 cars? Because remember, Jordan Anderson is also running the NASCAR Xfinity Series race this weekend at Daytona as well. Well, you would think that Jordan Anderson would be running a 3rd car for Jordan Anderson Racing. Well, no. Jordan Anderson is actually going to be driving Jeb Burton's number 27 car this weekend at Daytona International Speedway, meaning that Jordan will be guaranteed into the show because of the owner's points in the number 27 car. So what exactly is going on with Jeb Burton? Why is he not in the 27? Well, they're doing something really special and really, really cool. Jeb Burton is going to be driving the number 22 car for Jordan Anderson Racing this weekend at Daytona, and they're doing a throwback to his dad, Ward Burton's 2002 Daytona 500 victory. First thing I want to say before I get into my thoughts on this scheme looks absolutely amazing, absolutely incredible, and I hope that Jeb Burton can go on and win. It'd be really cool to see Jeb Burton go out and win this event, because I think he has a really great chance and a strong possibility of going on to win this race. Also, one thing you know is that Jeb Burton is guaranteed in, despite that they have a 3rd car, and I think there's 39 cars or 40 cars enter for this event. He's guaranteed in the show because of the past winners provisional, and he's also locked into playoffs as well, so he's guaranteed into the show regardless. I'm really excited about this. I love that Jeb Burton's going to be driving a 22 car. I think it looks great. Also, it's cool to see Jordan Anderson back in the Xfinity Series for the first time. Because remember, his crew chief is going to be Larry McReynolds. So Larry, I think, will give Jordan, because of course Jordan is his son-in-law. So I think Jordan Anderson will have a great chance, an opportunity to go out there and win this race, because we've seen Jordan competitive. And I think Jeb Burke could also win. So we'll see what happens. It's cool that they're going to be changing things up for this weekend, and I am very excited nonetheless about this. I'm looking forward to see Jordan Anderson Racing doing this for this year. I think it's really, really awesome and pretty exciting. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about stage cautions. Now, Elton Sawyer, who is the Vice President of Competition in NASCAR, went on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio yesterday. And shout out to Brett22 Fan Forever, who posted this clip on his social media. But stage cautions apparently are something that's in a discussion that may end after, that might be coming back in 2024 on the road courses. Now, NASCAR this year are taking away the stage cautions for 2023 because the teams and the drivers and even a lot of fans have been begging for stage cautions to return. But because of how not great the Cup Series race was, a lot of fans want to see stage cautions completely come back for road course in 2024, and NASCAR is also looking at that as well. Here's something I do want to say. I don't understand why a lot of fans and even some drivers in the industry now want to see stage cautions come back. I don't understand it. Number one, stage cautions being gone from road courses was one of the greatest decisions I think NASCAR has made probably in the last decade. When they had a stage racing, no one really had a problem with stage racing. Well, some did, but no one really had a problem. What a lot of people have had a problem with is the stage yellows. And if you add stage cautions at the road courses, you're going to create some very, very not so good racing. And it isn't going to fix the racing product itself. In fact, it is going to hurt the racing product because the fastest cars are going to have to decide, hey, do I want to go for the win or do I want to go for stage points? To me, that is not fair because those guys have earned the right to be up front. And if you continue the natural flow of racing, those guys are still going to be able to win. And it's not, like I said, it's not going to fix the racing product because the next-gen car currently at the moment is not a good race car on the short tracks and road courses. NASCAR, in my opinion, the biggest thing they need to do is add horsepower. NASCAR keeps doing minimalistic changes. They tried changing this up with the splitter. They tried changing this up with the spoiler. They've tried a lot of things. The underbody's a big issue, and they need to remove that. But certainly, one of the things is adding horsepower. At some point, NASCAR just needs to realize, hey, let's add horsepower to the next-gen car. We haven't got a new manufacturer in the sport at this point. This is year number 2 of the car. We've been in 3 or 4 years in development. We haven't got new manufacturing. So why don't we, at this point, just go ahead and add horsepower to this car? If you add horsepower, well, it's not going to be perfect. I think that will fix some of the issues with this car and maybe have more sliding around. The cars have 2 planets to the ground. That's the problem. And also, there's no time differentiation. I mean, there were 32 or 33 cars that finished on a lead lap in the Cup race. That is a lot of cars, especially on a short road course like this, even though it's 2.5 miles. It's still kind of a shorter road course, and you shouldn't be that. And the field was so close on time that you couldn't pass. There's too much dirty air. If you add horsepower, it'll mitigate some of these issues and some problems. So I don't want to see stage cautions back. I think it'd be terrible for the sport and absolutely a bad decision if NASCAR decided to do this because, in my opinion, I don't want to see them do this. I would not like this move, and I hope NASCAR decides, hey, let's not do this. Let's keep stage cautions. Let's get rid of stage cautions keep stage cautions off the road courses going forward in the foreseeable future. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about a youth ladder system. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern on Monday morning that NASCAR is developing a youth ladder system that would give young drivers and their parents a clear idea of the path to the summit of stock car racing. This is kind of very similar to what Formula One has done, and they're looking to maybe have a youth ladder system to try to give younger drivers an opportunity and a shot, and speaking to their parents as well. Obviously, NASCAR's current system is to currently race in ARCA West and ARCA East. You go kind of through the local series, then you kind of go to ARCA West and ARCA East, then you go to the Truck Series, or you can skip to the Xfinity Series, and then you can go to the Cup Series. What I think the plan here is they're basically trying to find a way to develop younger drivers and get them in a little bit quicker. But we've seen this story before time and time again, and it's happened in Formula One. It doesn't matter how much talent you have in Formula One. It all comes down to one thing: money. Look at a lot of drivers that are currently in NASCAR's top divisions, especially in the Truck Series. And again, I don't think there's completely a major issue at this point. You have a lot of drivers who are in the Truck Series right now, at least especially, who don't show a lot of respect. And you know what? A lot of these kids and drivers in the series don't have, they have money. They have money, so they really don't care. They tear the equipment up, they tear their shit up, and they don't race with a lot of respect out on the racetrack. That's something that needs to be taught. The etiquette in racing in general, it's not just NASCAR, but other forms of racing as well, generally is gone nowadays. And this is what you get when you have lack of etiquette on the racetrack and lack of respect. You continue to see this. Again, also, it will come down to money. You will see more paid drivers get in the sport. And I really hope and pray that this doesn't become a thing common again, because I think teams are trying to run away from that. You look at some of the drivers who are getting opportunities and chances. Josh Berry didn't really come from money. He basically got opportunity from Dale Jr., and he's kind of one of those rare cases that came from talent. You've got other drivers who have a lot of talent and have done a really good job as well. So it's something very interesting to think about. And honestly, when it does come to this youth ladder system, I don't think it's overall a bad move if they were to do something like this. I'm just not the biggest fan of them deciding to say, you know what, let's try to have a youth ladder system to try to make it better, because I don't think it's going to fix the respect on the track, and I certainly think it may end up making it worse. But it's interesting. It sounds like you're trying to copy Formula One, which they're doing other things like that at this point to fix this problem, but I think it's just going to create more problems than solutions. I appreciate NASCAR trying to figure something out to do to get rid of some of the money issues that have been kind of going on so we can have more talent in the sport. But again, there's not enough rides. You have a lot of money coming into play. Charters are insane right now, especially in the Cup Series, $40 to $50 million, which I think is absolutely insane, and it is a ton of money as well. It is interesting to see that NASCAR is looking at something like this, but at this point, I don't think it's the main thing in NASCAR needs to be looking at. I think they need to be looking at more different things. And now we're going to jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about GMS Racing. As it was announced early this morning that GMS Racing will officially cease operations at the end of the 2023 season. They also confirmed that the fabrication shop that GMS has will also cease operations at the end of 2023. This sucks, but it's unfortunately not surprising. There's been rumors over the last couple months that this likely was going to happen. Now, why is GMS Racing shutting down at the end of this year? Well, I think a big reason why is because of the switch in the Cup Series. Remember, Legacy Motor Club, which is owned by Maury Gallagher, who is the owner of GMS Racing and one of the higher-ups of that team as well, he basically is co-owner of Legacy and GMS Racing, of course, they're a Chevy-based team. Now, GMS Racing had a lot of success in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. They competed from 2011, and they will end their tenure in 2023. Again, it's really sad to see a team like GMS Racing shut down, considering all the success they have had. They've brought a lot of great talent, a lot of guys who've had opportunities to win. They've had Kyle Larson on the team. They've had Chase Elliott on the team. Alex Bowman on the team. They've also won championships with Johnny Sauter back in 2016. And they also, of course, won the Truck Series Championship only 3 years ago in 2020. But again, they've also at times have struggled. But I feel like this year in 2023 compared to 2022, they have shown some pretty big signs of improvement. And as an organization themselves, they have gotten a lot better. So it sucks to see a really good Truck Series team shutting down. But it also has a lot of big effects on the other side, because we talk about the fabrication shop that's also shutting down at the end of this season. So the big question is, who are they going to get the support from these other teams? Brent Holmes Racing is one of the teams that uses the GMS fabricating shop. So what happens with them? Do they get rid of their truck program, or do they basically go to KBM and work with them in Rev Racing like what Rev Racing does? What also happens with other teams like Bill McAnally Racing? We've seen Bill McAnally's organization, the McAnally-Hilgeman team, we've seen that team really become a much better and a much stronger organization in the Truck Series this year. What happens to them? Because I don't know if they'll perform the same, because Christian Eckes has a really good chance to win the championship at the end of this year. He could honestly win the Truck Series Championship and be competitive. And then you've also got other organizations that work with them. They're like CR7 Motorsports has been working with GMS Racing for the last 2 years. And then you got to think about the drivers. What happens with their three current drivers? Grant Enfinger, Roger Kroof, and Daniel Dyer are all not set for next year. Roger kind of confirmed us back in May that he didn't have a ride for 2024. So what happens to three drivers? Well, Grant Enfinger, I think, has the best option. I could see him honestly going back to Thor Sport Racing. He drove for them for a very, very long time and had a lot of success. But the relationship kind of ended on a not-so-great note. He didn't get to run the full entire season. The 98 truck had to drive for CR7 Motorsports in 2021. So that could put Grant Enfinger in a tough position. I could also see him going to a team like KBM, perhaps in her second truck. I think that is certainly possible going to next year. But I think Grant Enfinger, with him winning a lot of races in his career, I certainly think, especially with how good he's been this year, I can see him going to a better team. And then you think about Raja Kruf. Raja, I think, has quite a few options available for him going into next year, and I think he deserves a full-time opportunity because Raja, I've seen some huge signs of improvement, especially throughout the 2023 season. Has shown a lot more competitive speed in the truck series this year. I look at teams like Rev Racing, KBM, first off. That 51 truck is available, even though Kyle Busch did confirm he's going to run 5 truck races next year, and Chase Purdy is returning to the 4 truck next year. I could certainly see KBM being available. Rev Racing have only got 1 truck currently. I can see them expanding it to a second truck, maybe like 6 or 7. Comes to that team, even though Spire owns a 7. Maybe they bring a different ride in, maybe like the 0 truck. Maybe use that for Raja, perhaps. And then, of course, you could go Xfinity Racing with teams like Junior Motorsports. Junior Motorsports is rumored to potentially having a lot of changes coming to that team going into next year. There's also other organizations like Alpha Prime Racing, but Alpha Prime Racing, they have struggled this year. So I really hope Raja can find a good ride. And then you think about Daniel Dye. Daniel Dye, in my opinion, I think he's got the funding and sponsorship to go anywhere he wants to. I hope he can also find a ride going into 2023. Nonetheless, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to GMS Racing. Sucks are shutting down. Congrats all the success that organization's had. It's disappointing to see that they're shutting down at the end of the year, but sadly, it's not shocking or surprising that GMS Racing will not be around at the conclusion of this year. They'll be shutting down at the end of the year. Congrats on all the success. It sucks seeing an organization shut down, but again, it's not surprising with the Legacy Motor Club situation where they're switching to Toyota in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we are talking about Netflix. As it was officially announced and confirmed on Monday evening that the NASCAR Cup Series Playoffs and Championship race will be the centerpiece of an upcoming Netflix series, docuseries, premiering in early 2024. That's executive produced by Dale Jr. and Ben Kennedy and the team behind The Last Dance. For those who don't know about The Last Dance, it is one of the greatest sports documentaries ever come out, and it talks about Michael Jordan and the success of the Chicago Bulls. This is absolutely huge for many reasons. And one of the biggest reasons is to reach that 18 to 49 demographic. NASCAR has been chasing that younger demographic for a very long time, and now they're going to have the chance and opportunity. And a big reason why going to Netflix is huge, look at Formula One's growth. They have had Drive to Survive, and they have grown a lot, especially in the last few years. Even though there's been a lot of snobheads that come into play, they have grown a lot in the last few years because of Drive to Survive, which has grown the popularity of Formula One. Now, do I think NASCAR is going to have that same approach and same growth that Formula One has had here in the United States? Probably not, just because Formula One has been growing. They've got a pretty good series, even though it's kind of dropped off at times in performance of that series. But this 5-race series is huge. And again, this is basically the second season of it, because remember, they tried this on USA. They tried this docuseries late in 9 USA, which, don't get me wrong, the series was really good, which was Race for the Championship, but it was on USA on Thursday nights when Thursday Night Football was going on, and nobody watched it, and it was a lost cause. This has a really great chance and opportunity to reach that younger demographic. NASCAR's making a lot of big changes recently. Obviously got NASCAR Classics that's come in recently, which I think has been a very major and big success to bring old school races back. And I think it's one of the coolest things they've done. There's a lot of talk that MSG is going to lose the license with NASCAR. We kind of talk about that, which that sounds very likely. That's going to be announced on September 30th because there hasn't been no new games announced. And there won't be an exclusive license, which I think is really great for the sport in general as well. And then, of course, this Netflix documentary going after the younger demographic. Because remember, NASCAR has one of the oldest fan bases currently in sports altogether. I think golf is the only sport right now that has older fan base than NASCAR's fan base. Because NASCAR's average age, I think, is like 59 or 60 years old. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if your sport is going to survive long term, you have to go after that younger demographic. So to me, I think this is an absolute huge dub for NASCAR. I think you're going to have a lot of people who are going to see that because, again, Netflix documentaries have generally been very successful. That golf documentary that came out. You've had other documentaries about Patrick Mahomes come out recently, and in general, I think this is an absolute huge win. I know Netflix has thousands upon thousands of documentaries, but sports documentaries in general, they tend to do very good, especially on Netflix. So I'm nonetheless really excited about this. I'm definitely going to be tuning in. And the fact they've got Dale Jr. involved in this as well, I think is huge because Dale Jr. is going to promote the hell out of this. He's going to promote this really, really substantially. He's going to do a great job on that, and I do believe this is going to be an absolute huge win for NASCAR in more ways than one. Again, I'm really excited about this. It's been something that's been kind of being developed. This was basically reported last week. This is likely going to happen, and I'm very happy to see that there is going to be a Netflix documentary coming out. I'm excited about this. I'm looking forward to it and glad to see, because again, this has been something that's been rumored for a while. They were talking about this. Of course, they did have the race series of Bubba Wallace, the documentary on Bubba Wallace, and it was so freaking awesome. I loved it, and it won an Emmy as well. I honestly could see this winning an Emmy and winning some pretty big awards here in 2024. It's going to come out in 2024. They're working on developing it, 5 episodes, and I'm really excited it's going to be on Netflix in 2024. Really excited and really pumped up about it. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about 2311 Racing and Stewart-Haas Racing. Now, on Monday, I made a video discussing this on the channel, talking about 2311 Racing, because earlier in the weekend, it was reported by Lee Spencer from Catchments.com that 2311 Racing had reportedly been having conversations with Ford about maybe switching manufacturers from Toyota to Ford in 2024. Now, she went on PRN on Monday evening and discussed more on this, and she reported that 2311 Racing once again could be headed to Ford in the 2024 season. And how would 2311 Racing head to Ford? Well, currently at the moment, 2311 Racing, very similar to Denny Hamlin, is on an expiring contract. Now, Denny Hamlin did go on his podcast and said that he has his contract done and ready to go. But the reason he hasn't had the deal signed yet with Joe Gibbs Racing for 2024 is because of 2311 Racing, because very similar to Denny Hamlin's contract, 2311 Racing is on an expiring contract. So how could 2311 Racing stay with Toyota or switch to Ford? And apparently, according to what Lee Spencer said on the PRN show, she said that Stewart-Haas Racing may be selling, but also 2311 Racing is looking to expand going into next year. Now, it was reported by her that charters have gone up in price. We all had heard that it was around $30 million. We are hearing now that charters right now are worth between $40 million and $50 million going into 2024, which is absolutely insane and a ton of money. So where could 2311 Racing get their charters from if they were to switch to Ford? Let's look at Stewart-Haas Racing. According to her, Stewart-Haas Racing may not just be selling one charter going into 2024, but they might be selling 2 charters going into the 2024 season. And where could they get that from? Well, it sounds like also according to Lee Spencer that Eric Almirola may actually be retiring at the end of 2023, which we've heard those rumors for a few months, and that Eric Almirola has been considering a potential to retire at the end of the 2023 season. And it's because Smithfield, it sounds like if Eric Almirola is retired at the end of the year, that they may be leaving the organization at the end of 2023. And it sounds like one of those SHR charters may be going over to 2311 Racing, which is where Denny Hamlin could end up driving in a number 11 2311 Racing car in 2024. Look, it's no secret that Stewart-Haas Racing, because we'll talk about this in a second, but Stewart-Haas Racing, they are also on expiring contract at the end of next year, so they could basically already be making the move early. Tony Stewart has said they're likely going to be staying with Ford, but Stewart-Haas Racing, let's talk about them. It is no secret that Stewart-Haas Racing in general has been struggling in the 2023 season. Outside of Kevin Harvick, he's the only driver who's likely going to make the playoffs this year in 2023 because he's already locked in after locking his way in at Watkins Glen. But Kevin Harvick is like 8th or 9th in points. Compared to the rest of Stewart-Haas Racing, Eric Almirola is like 26th or 27th. Ryan Preece moved up a little bit. I think he's like 25th or 26th. And then you have Chase Briscoe, who's 32nd or 33rd. Yes, he has a big points penalty. He'd be a little bit closer to Kevin Harvick in points. But Chase Briscoe still will be like 21st or 22nd. He has struggled in the 2023 season really, really badly. And I think because they're looking at making some big moves. We obviously know that Kevin Harvick's retiring at the end of the year, and we know that Busch money is going over to Trackhouse Racing next year in 2024. Because that's a lot of money going out there. And they haven't announced any funding for Josh Berry going into next year. But that's not the only thing that's going on. According to her as well, Zane Smith has apparently been having conversations with 2311 Racing. We obviously know that Zane Smith is likely not returning to front row next year. Sounds very likely that he doesn't want to be in the Truck Series next year, and Zane Smith does want to go Cup racing on a full-time basis. We know that he's out of the market to go in front row on a full-time basis. They were trying to get a third car for Zane Smith next year, front row was, but that unfortunately is not going to be happening in 2024. So then you think about some other potential possibilities. He could go, of course, to the 10 car for Stewart-Haas Racing, or could go to that third 2311 Racing car. So that's a lot going on right there. But again, SHR downsizing would not be the biggest shock or biggest surprise because, like I said, they are basically SHR struggling, and I think they want to get better. They've been really, really bad this year, and they know they do have to make some pretty big executive changes if they're going to want to be better long term. But there's, like I said, also that chance that SHR leaves Ford. There's been talk maybe they can go back to Chevy next year. I know they had a rumor a few months ago that Dale Jr. maybe be wanting to buy in, but it sounds like that's not happening at this point. With how much charters are at this point, there is no way in any shape or form that that's going to happen. But I want to circle back and talk about 2311 Racing switching to Ford. We know that this has been something that talked about. According to her, Denny Hamlin's lawyer has spoken to representatives from Ford because, of course, Denny Hamlin's lawyer also works at 2311 Racing as well as also higher at 2311 Racing. If 2311 Racing is to switch at Ford in 2024, this would be a massive, massive loss for Toyota. But there's also that conversation, and a big reason why they're probably talking is because Legacy Motor Club, they're not going to be aligned with Joe Gibbs Racing. They're going to be getting direct support from Toyota. And I think 2311 Racing and Denny Hamlin are probably frustrated right now that they're not going to be getting full Toyota support, and they're getting alliance with Joe Gibbs Racing. And remember, you do have to remember this too, Toyota has not the greatest history in the world with organizations in the Toyota pipeline. You look at organizations like Furniture Row Racing. Furniture Row won a championship in 2017. They jacked up the price, and then that team shut down at the end of 2018, and they brought Mark Trichinard in. Then they had Levine Family Racing, who had a Joe Gibbs Racing alliance, and then they basically shut that team down at the end of 2020, and they brought Chris Rebell in. They basically have not had a really, really great history and a great relationship there. So I think that 2311 is looking out for their best interest. You also have to look at the fact that they've got their own pit crews now. They're training their own pit crews, and maybe it's kind of bit them in the butt, but still, they're training their own pit crews. I think if they lose 2311 Racing, Toyota does, despite the fact that they're gaining Legacy Motor Club next year, this would be an absolute loss for Toyota, and a second year in a row, because this is kind of similar to the Kyle Busch situation. But the Kyle Busch situation was a little bit different too, because that was a sponsor situation where, of course, M&M's announced at the end of 2021 they'd be leaving at the end of 2022, and then Kyle Busch left to go to Richard Childress Racing, and Kyle Busch has gone on to win 3 races. Now, if Denny Hamlin is, of course, to leave Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of the year, I would imagine that John Hunter Nemechek would end up being the driver to take over that number 11 car or whatever the car is next year, even though John Hunter is heavily rumored at this point to be going full-time with Legacy Motor Club into 42 car next year. This could open up a huge can of worms and could open up a lot of crazy possibilities for the 2024 season when it does come to silly season. But I think there's a lot of possibilities going to 2024. But again, if Toyota, they lose 2311 Racing, that is an absolute loss. But again, I think there's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes. And again, I think a lot of people at 2311 know that Toyota historically has not been the greatest when it comes to keeping their drivers and their people around. So I'm not surprised they're looking at other options. Now, when it comes to my personal opinion, do I think that they will stay next year? I think it's pretty likely at this point. I still think I'm still 75% or 70% confident, but my confidence was about a week or two ago was probably at 90-95%. My confidence has dropped to that 70 to 75% chance of them returning in 2024. But if they switch to Ford next year, this is absolutely going to be a massive bombshell. And again, speaking about Eric Almirola's retirement, that would be an absolute bombshell as well. And again, so going back to talking about Zane Smith, he's currently having conversations with 2311 Racing as well. So there's so many rabbit holes to go down with the story. I could spend all day talking about the story, but this is an absolutely huge bombshell that I am absolutely surprised. So I do think that Denny Hamlin gets a deal done. I still think he goes back to JGR, but I think that there's a lot of stuff that could happen and a lot of chaos that could happen with silly season here in the foreseeable future. So that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on so if I win a video, does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. What are your thoughts about Denny potentially switching to 2311 Racing and driving for Ford next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the stories discussed today on the channel, including the Netflix series? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. To my channel, we're going to have the NASCAR race picks video for the Cup Series race at Daytona. Then on Friday, we have a NASCAR news video on the channel. And then, of course, we're going to have the Xfinity Series race view from Daytona. Then on Saturday, we have the NASCAR Cup Series race view from Daytona. A lot of great content dropping on the channel. I appreciate all the support. So if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. And I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.